Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the program tonight, the new hiked GST rates come into effect. This triggers outrage in the country at a time when retail inflation has remained high. The opposition says it's completely unacceptable that daily use items like rice, wheat, curd, grains and jaggery, among other items, have seen a GST hike from 0% to 5%. On the show tonight, the GST hike which has taken place on hospital beds to bread. Are these taxing times for the Aam Aadmi? We've got Rajiv Kumar of the Niti Aayog, Madan Sabnavis joins us as well, Rajat Sethi, Supriya Shrinate of the Congress Party. Thank you all very much for being with us. In fact, let me just go straight across to Rajat Sethi first. Rajat, inflation has remained above the RBI's 6% target for the entire year. Household expenses have gone up by a lot more. In fact, by 20 to 30% in just the last 6 months. So this was perhaps the time to bring some relief, but the government only seems to have increased the pain by adding taxes. Isn't that a huge problem?
Vishnuji, as you would be aware that the GST, reaching to a consensus in GST Council is a long drawn process. It does not happen overnight. There have been consultations on this specific topic, well researched by a group of ministers. That group of ministers incidentally had both BJP finance ministers as well as Congress and Trinamool Congress finance ministers as well. There is a legality, a technicality aspect which was there. Why, this tweaking of us, and by the way, it's a small tweak which was brought in. There was a differentiation which was created between non-labeled and labeled goods. Labeled goods companies used to evade GST, and there was some kind of a leakage because they used to package them, bundle them above the technical limit which was brought in by the Legal Metrology Act of 2009. They used to package more such goods in a pre-packaged condition and did not pay that 5% GST, which was anyway applicable on the labeled goods. So if you go today, breaking it for your viewers, if you go today to say Big Bazaar, and if you want to buy a labeled wheat flour, that is going to cost you still the same because they were anyway paying 5% on that. The common man and the poor section of the society, which goes to the fair price shop, is anyway going to continue getting at the same price without any GST.
Okay, Supriya Shrinate, does that answer? Just half a sec. Let me bring in Supriya as well. Is that a response that satisfies you that those who need to be protected, the poor people in our country, remain protected?
No, I just want to understand how. I mean, it belies my imagination. How do they remain protected? The Prime Minister in 2019 gives a huge speech about aate par kartha, is par kartha, us par kartha, and today curd, lassi, buttermilk, paneer being charged at 5%. They were under a zero category. Rice, wheat, white barley oats at 5%. I mean, something like an LED bulb being charged at 18%. Is that what we want to call a common man's tax? Let's please understand one thing. Let's not miss the woods for the trees. Let us figure out one thing. What is GST? GST is an indirect tax. It is a tax on the consumers. So this is not going to increase consumption. This is only going to dent consumption.
Right.
And this is a tax on consumers from the richest Indian to the poorest rickshawala, who will pay the same rate of GST on the products where the GST has been raised today. If you were to ask me, when inflation is raging, how do you curb inflation? By increasing taxes on the poor. I mean, how do you? There is, it belies my logical thinking as to why the government will do what it has done. And it's very fashionable to come here and say the GST Council. Well, 70% of the GST Council is made of the BJP. Why don't they answer? Is this how you?
All right. So let Rajat have some responses to that. Go ahead, Rajat.
Madam, your rationality has been belied, and why don't you go and ask Rahul Gandhi to seek resignation of the Rajasthan finance minister, who was part of the group of ministers which recommended this thing? The moment she does that, she will have the moral high stand to come in and debate on this topic. Otherwise, this debate, what the problem with our politicians is, they have nice 5-star dining in the GST Council day when deliberations happen, and then they come out of those taking all these kinds of decisions and then go back on their own decisions on which they have signed upon without any objection. And they come on the television and do politics. I'll tell you the reason, Vishnu. The main point is that our policy making, and thankfully so, our policy making is done away from the din of politics. All this political tamasha that you are seeing is all for the show. actual policy making happens on thinking and rationality, and this is the reason why even Finance Minister of Trinamool as well as the Congress party sign on these things, because there was leakage.
Can I just come in for 5 seconds?
Supriya, go ahead. Yes.
In the market who were trying to sell packaged goods were not paying the 5% GST because of this 25 kg norm, which was brought in 2009 through this act called the Legal Metrology Act, which is part of the Commodities Taxation Act.
Supriya?
I love the fact that the BJP supporter is actually laying bare what the BJP does. You're absolutely right. Rational thinking. You are right. The Prime Minister, when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, thought the GST was the single most...
Rajasthan Finance
Please keep quiet. I did not speak in
That's the only point that I'm making, nothing else.
Offer me the same courtesy. Keep quiet. I did not speak in between. You know, you'll go and tweet and then delete. Don't get hassled. I'm making a point. Let me make a point. The Gujarat Chief Minister, Mr. Modi, as the working group chairman, wrote to the Prime Minister, then Dr. Manmohan Singh, that the GST is bad for the economy, it must not be done. As Prime Minister, he thinks GST is the best thing, that's double speak. As Prime Minister of India in 2019, he gives a speech ki aate par dal pe GST hona chahiye. In 2022, he is putting the GST. The problem with the BJP is, chit bhi meri aur pat bhi meri nahi chal sakti hai. Either you want to go all out and control inflation, because this is going to be inflationary, or you sit back and say, I am going to increase taxes. GST is a tax on the consumer. How is the government trying to increase consumption, which has been dented in this economy, is my simple, basic economic question to which there is never an answer. How are we going to stoke consumption is a simple question I'm asking, away from the politics and away from everything else.
Let's put that question to Mr. Rajiv Kumar. Mr. Kumar, the government in fact keeps saying inflation is because of global factors outside their control. Then why did you have to, or why did the government have to raise taxes, something that is within their control at this stage?
Vishnu, the raising of taxes does not automatically lead to inflation. Inflation is the rate of change in prices. Taxation is a once-off act that you do, and once it's been levied, it will not, the prices will increase marginally, but after that it will stop increasing. You know that the commodity prices have declined by 20 to 40% in the last couple of months. The CPI has come down, the WPI has come down, and as it's very clear, the GST rationalization has been done to prevent leakages and does not affect the consumption of the ordinary man. The unlabeled, unprocessed, unpackaged commodities are not being taxed. They are still.
But isn't there, sir, an assumption that people who are poorer would necessarily buy unpackaged or unlabeled items?
I mean,
why is that the case?
That lends to common sense.
No, but sir, curd, lassi, buttermilk are pre-packaged and labeled, are available across the country, sir. And it is sold to people of all economic classes.
Can I please
Vishnu, we have to agree to the definition of the common man. The common man is not one which is living in a hospital room where the charges are 5,000 rupees plus.
No, sir, but I'm asking you about a specific point you said.
No,
you're talking about prepackaged and labeled items. Now, of course, the rate is 5%. And the point that you have been mentioning is that poorer people of a lower socioeconomic standing, or lower economic standing, not socioeconomic, and economic standing, right, are still getting this free, right, at 0% GST. No taxes over there. But my point, sir, is that when it comes to buttermilk, lassi, curd, all of these items and many other items, they're all available entirely packaged and for everybody in the country. It's not that people who are poorer, don't have this access to it.
I'm not sure of that at all. Because if you go even today in the posh colonies of Delhi and you go to a Bengali sweet house, etc., and you buy the yogurt which is unbranded or drink a glass of lassi, is unbranded and is not taxed. So let's not get too fine a point. But the other point that you must remember,
half a second, Supriya,
that the pre-GST tax rate on average, state and center combined, were 31% plus. The maximum highest rate today is 28%. 200 of the 240 commodities covered under that tax rate have been removed and moved to a lower rate. And this tax rationalization has continued. And as the previous speaker, I think Mr. Sethi said, that this is all a result of a consensus among all the states and the central government.
Okay,
and
so 1 second. Supriya
Can I
wants to
please
come
come
in,
in?
and then I'll go across to Mr. Sabnavis. Yes.
You know, it's the most blasphemous argument being made, because if the 5% tax has to be justified, even if I were to be the devil's advocate and say, okay, let's justify the 5% tax, I want to understand, are there input taxes that will be set off? And are there input taxes on lassi and paneer? And if there are, what are those taxes? I would really want to know. We're making an economic argument. Give me an economic answer to this. What are the input taxes that we are taking on lassi and paneer and dahi and honey and jaggery? You know, the problem is we cannot just... Sir, 1 second, sir. Sir, 1 second. I'm not here to argue with you. I also want to make one important point here. Hospitals. Have you been to a private hospital, sir? There is no room that you get for less than 5,000 unless it's double sharing. So let's not presume that taxes are only for the poor. It's also for middle class. It's also for lower middle class. I mean, hospital bed, if it's at over 5,000, you're going to be taxed higher. Why? I mean, let's get rational.
All right, 1 second, Mr. Kumar.
Mr. Kumar, ट्रीटमेंट मिलता है सर, सबको नहीं मिलता है इस देश में, प्राइवेट रूम में. इस देश के प्राइवेट रूम 5,000 रुपए से बहुत ज्यादा है. और इनपुट टैक्स बताइए मुझे सर.
ये इनपुट टैक्स अगर आप पैकेज करेंगे तो जो उसकी पैकेजिंग होगी ना, उस पर इनकम टैक्स, इनपुट टैक्स लगा होगा, और उससे आपको जो है वो रिलीफ मिलेगा. And all the other inputs that you use, if you're going to sell lassi, you'll use sugar, you'll use flavoring, you'll use whatever, all those will be set off. So it's wrong to say that. And again, for example, you know, this time what you've done is that you've raised the tax on uncut diamonds from 0.5 to 1.5. All of that has been done to unlock the whole amount of working capital that was there with the diamond industry, and the industry has welcomed it. The industry has explicitly welcomed that.
So who's buying diamonds in this country? Are we going to make the argument about diamond and dahi and paneer in the same breath?
It generates employment. It is the largest export.
You know this.
All right, both of you, half a second. I just want to go across to Madan Sabnavis. Mr. Sabnavis, you've been waiting very patiently, and I just wanted to ask you, do you believe that the timing of the introduction of these taxes now couldn't have come at a worse time? Inflationary pressures are high. It's above the RBI's threshold. At a time like this, do people in this country really need a rise in taxes?
Okay, let me put it this way. In terms of sentiment, it definitely does go along with what you have said, that in inflationary times, any kind of an imposition of a tax is something which does push us back. And one thing is for certain is that prices will definitely increase of whichever products where we have this 5% GST. But in terms of inflation, you know, we've just done a rough calculation as to what's really going to happen. It's going to be very, very insignificant. Because if you look at the way in which the CPI is calculated, how the indices, sub-indices are calculated, and how we get quotations of different products on different things. Now, as far as this particular category we're talking of is quite marginal, it's quite minimum. So in terms of the overall inflation number of 6% to 7%, we will not really be seeing any kind of an increase. But then it's, of course, common sense that if I'm going to pay 5% on all these products which are mentioned, we will be paying a higher price.
Okay. Rajat, for the last 3 months, retail inflation has been above 7%, food inflation close to 8%, and now this hike in GST rates on, on basic dual-use items, rice, wheat, curd, grains, honey, jaggery, puff rice, from 0 to 5%. These are basic items. I understand what you're saying when it comes to packaged versus unpackaged, but a lot of these items are packaged for all sections, and I think the point that Supriya was mentioning, which I think is important, is that let's also talk about India's middle class. A jump to 5% hits a lot of people.
See, Vishnuji, I will not respond to Supriyaji's question till she does not respond that why has she not sought the resignation of the Rajasthan's finance minister? Because he went against the interests of the middle. Madam, I did not
burdening the government and the people of this
decency
country
to allow the other participant to speak.
You just named me, so I thought I should
go and seek the resignation of the Rajasthan finance minister, a couple of other, in Chhattisgarh finance minister also. And then, because both of your finance ministers were actually, what they were speaking against the stated position of Congress party. Please, Vishnu, allow me to speak. I can't.
Okay, half a second.
You are a BJP supporter.
Supriya, half a second. Let him make his point. Rajat, go ahead, and then
Supriya. To keep quiet. Of course, Congress spokesperson and decency are oxymorons. It does not exist. But allow me this.
At least I don't have to go and delete tweets that I put out, Rajat.
If Congress's stated position, an
Factually
official
incorrect
position
tweets
is
where you
to
called out.
protect the middle class,
Anyways, go ahead.
then Supriya ji should go and ask the resignation of Chhattisgarh's finance minister and Rajasthan's finance minister. Only then I will respond to her. Now coming to the moot point, like look at the
Factually
hospital
incorrect
rates.
tweets I don't put out, which I have to delete later.
Ma'am, please keep quiet. I know you don't have the decency. I know all the Congress spokespersons and how they are trained.
I don't need a certificate from you. Go ahead.
They can't take facts in. That's
You're more
as
loyal
simple as
than
that,
the
okay?
king. You should
Please
not
understand,
be calling
on
yourself an
hospital
analyst.
beds, on
Economist,
5,000
that's what they're
rupees
calling
hospital
you.
beds. Vishnu, will you ask her to keep quiet or should I moderate the debate?
No, Rajat, you raising points against her, so she's responding to your personal remarks. Now, I can't stop her from doing that. If both of you want to stick to economics, then that's fine.
He's going on naming me, and I'm expected to keep quiet. Why should I keep quiet?
No, so Rajat, make your point without taking pot shots at her, and I'm sure Supriya won't take pot shots at you. So let's define this. Rajat, 1 second. Rajat, go ahead, make your point. 1 sec, Rajat, make your point. Supriya, I'll come in after that. Rajat, go ahead.
Go ahead. Don't cry. Go ahead. Don't cry.
Rajat, 1 second. Rajat, Supriya, hang on 1 second. I will get you to respond.
I will talk. If he is going to name me, I will interfere.
All right, 1 second. He won't name you. Rajat, make an economic argument, please. Make an economic argument, and I'll get Supriya to respond to that.
If you get a politician on this debate, he or she will sully the debate. They will bring in political arguments, and behind the curtains, they will be the first ones to sign on that policy. That's the fact this country has been going through.
Vishnu, I've had enough of this hogwash. Can I please come in?
Half a second,
this
Supriya.
This is going to go on. I need to walk out like this. I cannot carry on with somebody's blabbering at the back of my head.
You can.
Supriya, respond to that this is a political argument which needs to be looked at from an economic standpoint. Go ahead.
If the hospital...
Rajat, half a second, you've asked a question, let her answer.
They are levying 300 rupees as the GST. Where is that a lot? Tell me which poor goes to a hospital bed. And you remember, by the way, these indirect tax collections are eventually redistributed and redistributed in a more targeted manner so that people who actually need free treatment, free healthcare through the Ayushman Bharat can actually be provided that. How else do you get that money?
All right, okay. Rajat, let her respond now, please. Go ahead.
I love
Supriya.
how the BJP and its supporters threaten to walk out. Walk out. It's not going to be anybody's loss. I will make a larger point. There is something about timing and decision making. CPI is at 7%. WPI is at 15%, and Dr. Rajiv Kumar, who I have personal regard for, turns around and says inflation is going down. I do not know in which parallel world are you living in, sir. Inflation is not going down. Inflation has consistently been above the RBI's comfort zone of 2 to 6% according to the mandate given to the RBI. So inflation is very, very high, above 7%, just to correct you. I want to understand one thing. What are we debating here? We are debating packaging should be expensive and non-packaged. I mean, shouldn't hygiene, जो लोग स्वच्छ भारत की बात करते रहते, shouldn't hygiene be a concern? Suppose if I'm having an Amul charge, I need to pay more than a roadside charge. Why can't the roadside guy also be selling packaged things? Why are we penalizing, lower middle class people who would want packaging?
All right, let's get a response to that.
The tendency to sell unpackaged foods is going to be encouraged, and what is packaged is going to be taxed. I mean, what are we talking about? एक तरफ स्वच्छ भारत की बात करेंगे, एक तरफ packaged hygienic.
All right, one second. Mr. Kumar, Supriya, half a second. Mr. Kumar, would you like to respond to that, sir?
Well, I mean, what can I say? I said inflation is declining. It is declined from 7.4% to 7% in June. That's declining. It's high, it's another matter. It's above the target rate is another matter. But the fact is that it is softening, and that is what I had said. I don't know where the response is. Second thing is that, again, to mix up with Swachh Bharat and the difference between packaged and unpackaged food is wrong. Because unpackaged food and packaged food, the difference is that different class of consumers consume that. And the point is also to be noted that you have to compare the pre-GST levels and rates to the post-GST levels and rates. And these are consistently lower than what you had earlier, consistently on all products and commodities across the range. So the question simply is, yes, the inflation is above the targeted RBI rate, the government is trying, the RBI is trying to take control of it, bring it down by doing whatever. But at the same time, the fiscal policy of the government has to be rationalized and has to be made in a manner that leakages are prevented, that the companies which are using the
Can I please come in, Vishnu?
Are not allowed to do that. And there is no, yes, one can see that there will be a situation where you will say that inflation will rise as a result of that. And I said to begin with that inflation does not
Vishnu,
rise.
can I come in for 5 seconds, please?
It's a once-off increase, and it doesn't lead to a change or a rate of increase.
Dr. Kumar,
Dr. Kumar,
Dr. Rajiv Kumar, you are a noted economist. You've been vice chairman of Niti Aayog. I'm sure you're reading the RBI reports, because the RBI reports are consistently saying they expect the inflation to rise in the coming months. You're only fueling it further. Point one. And point two, 1 second, sir, I did not. Point two I'm trying to make is, what morality, what moral compass does the government have to tax things of mass consumption because they are being packaged? I mean, government should encourage hygienic consumption, should it not? That's all that I'm asking. And the timing of it, sir, you can keep telling me from 7.5, it's come down to 7.3. But the institution that is supposed to control inflation is turning around and telling you that inflation will rise.
Priya, please, you made your point. Let others answer. Mr. Kumar, would you like to answer this one specific point that keeps coming up on packaged versus unpackaged items?
Yes, Vishnu.
Also,
it
RBI.
is quite clear to me, and what I can see, day-to-day life, is that there are different class of consumers who consume packaged and non-packaged goods, and therefore the common man, as far as I can make out, is not affected, by this tax.
All right,
but I don't know why this argument is brought up all the time. But the other thing is that. About this inflation rate, the RBI has said that the inflation will soften and decline further towards the third quarter of the year, and that is what even the multilateral organizations like the IMF, etc., have endorsed that. So the RBI is fully in charge of that, in the sense that
they are talking about diamonds and dahi in the same breath.
They are raising the interest rates. And whatever else needs to be done has to be done.
All right, look, I need to wrap this up. We're running out of time on this. This is going to have an impact on the common person one way or the other. At a time when inflation rates are still very high, it is certainly a matter of concern. I'd like to thank you very much for being with us. We've got a couple of comments which have also come in. Let's just take a look at what people are saying on coup. Let's bring up those comments. The new GST declaration doesn't even seem to offer a modicum of respite to the Aam Aadmi, is one view. Another, amidst the rising inflation and looming recession, a 5% GST charge on ICU rooms, is it a sensible move by the government, is what has been asked in another question.